On the 8th day of Mr. Kelly's trial, a man and woman both testified that they were underage when they met the singer. The woman, now 44, described being raped. The racketeering trial of the R&B star, R. Kelly, resumed in Brooklyn on Monday, August 30th, with the testimony of two new accusers, including the first male accuser to take the stand against the singer. Until Monday, all of the accusers to testify against Mr. Kelly had been women, mirroring many of the high-profile trials that have been at the center of the Me Too movement. But Lewis, like the four women to testify before him, told jurors that he was underage during a sexual encounter with Mr. Kelly. This is what happened as the third week of Mr. Kelly's trial began. The man who accuses R. Kelly of abuse for the first time. The first man to accuse Mr. Kelly of sexual abuse at his trial testified on Monday, August 30th, that he was a 17-year-old aspiring rapper when Mr. Kelly asked him what he was willing to do to advance his music career, and that the singer brought the teenager to his garage and crawled up to him to perform a sex act on him. "He just told me we had to keep it between me and him," the man, who testified under the name Lewis, a pseudonym, told jurors on Monday, adding that Mr. Kelly told him, "We're family now. We're brothers." The two first met around 2006, when Lewis was a senior in high school and working at a McDonald's in the Chicago area. The singer gave him and another worker his phone number while in the drive-thru line, Lewis testified. Lewis said that his mother called Mr. Kelly, hopeful that the entertainer could help further her son's music ambitions, and Mr. Kelly invited the family to a party at his mansion. While there, the two took a photo and the singer whispered in his ear that he should come back to other parties alone, Lewis told jurors. Afterward, Lewis twice traveled to Mr. Kelly's studio, known as the Chocolate Factory, to record music and receive feedback, he said. Their first sexual encounter came after the singer invited Lewis under a similar guise, he said, and then asked if he had any fantasies involving men once he arrived. As they continued to meet, Lewis said Mr. Kelly began to call him a little brother, told him to refer to him as daddy, and recorded their sexual encounters. He said that he kept seeing Mr. Kelly because he really wanted to make it, and that he took friends to some of the singer's parties. Lewis said Mr. Kelly asked him to keep bringing back one of his best friends. The friend was a 16-year-old boy who later received Mr. Kelly's phone number, Lewis said, and court documents say that Mr. Kelly began having sexual encounters with him, too, while he was underage. On one occasion, the singer directed the two to touch each other sexually, Lewis testified, but they refused. At another point, Lewis told jurors, he and Mr. Kelly met at his home in Olympia Fields, Ill. In a garage set up as a workout area. Mr. Kelly snapped his fingers 2 times, Lewis testified, and a naked young lady crawled out from under a boxing ring that was in the room. Mr. Kelly instructed her to perform a sex act on himself, and then on Lewis, he said. "It was just a weird situation," Lewis said. "It was uncomfortable." Mr. Kelly, who has appeared impassive through most of the trial, seemed to become agitated by Lewis's testimony, wiping his head and clutching his mask while the man was on the stand Monday. As Lewis spoke, Mr. Kelly shook his head and folded his hands. The man said his interactions with Mr. Kelly continued for several years. Lewis recently pleaded guilty to attempted bribery for offering money to a potential witness against Mr. Kelly if she agreed to stop cooperating with the government. He said he did not want to testify on Monday, but entered an agreement to do so in exchange for the government notifying the judge on his case of his cooperation. Mr. Kelly's legal team homed in on the details of the agreement in its cross-examination. "You have to be truthful according to what the government finds to be truthful?" asked Deborah O. L. Canick, one of Mr. Kelly's lawyers, suggesting Lewis's accounts had been fabricated or embellished. Another accuser says R. Kelly knew she was underage. A woman named Addie testified on Monday that when she was 17 years old, Mr. Kelly invited her backstage after a performance. She told him that she was underage, she said, and he assaulted her. It was September 1994 and she and her best friend were at a concert in Miami, where the R&B star Aaliyah had been scheduled to perform and Mr. Kelly was the closing act, Addie said. Just 2 days earlier, other witnesses have testified. The two artists were illegally married. Aaliyah was 15 at the time, and Mr. Kelly was 27. After Mr. Kelly's performance, 2 men, who looked like bouncers, approached Addie and her friend and told them that they could go backstage for an autograph, she said. The two were taken to a large dressing room, Addie told jurors. She said he gave her his autograph and she told him that she was an aspiring artist. Mr. Kelly wrote his hotel room number, 1031, at the bottom of her program and encouraged her to come audition, she said. But she told him that she was 17, and did not even know if she was allowed backstage. Kelly then cleared the room, and told the pair he wanted to play a game, to see who could kiss better. He kissed her friend, she said, and then began to kiss Addie as well, she testified. He started getting a little more aggressive, she said, and directed her to the back of the room. He held her wrists, unzipped her shorts and had unprotected sexual intercourse with her, she said. At this point, I was in complete shock, she continued. I just went blank. Afterward, Addie and her friend ran out of there, she said. Her friend wanted her to contact the police and press charges, she said. But Addie feared that she would be blacklisted from the entertainment industry if she did. I didn't even know if they would believe me, she said. I didn't want to be victim-shamed. On cross-examination, Mr. Kanek questioned Addie about her decision to save the program from the concert as what he called memorabilia, despite the attack she had described on the stand. He also scrutinized the delay in reporting the attack to law enforcement, asking her why she had waited 24 years. She said she had feared additional trauma or being blamed for the attack, but no longer did. I'm an adult now, Addie said through tears. I'm no longer a little girl. Kelly brought women to his basketball games who seemed isolated and behaved strangely, a former associate says. A man who worked with Mr. Kelly testified that the two played basketball together in Atlanta, but that the behavior of the women who the R&B singer brought to their games seemed strange. They would actually sit in the corner, away from everybody, the man, Derek Stevens, said, describing them as isolated from the larger group. If one of the players needed to approach them to retrieve a ball, the women would cross their legs and look at the ceiling, or the wall, said Mr. Stevens, who helped with Mr. Kelly's business deals and coordinated his collaborations with other artists for a short time, starting in 2013. His testimony served to bolster the account of another woman, who testified last week that she and others went to Mr. Kelly's basketball games on several occasions, but were barred from engaging with other male players, per one of the singer's strict rules. We would just have to watch the defendant play, and only him, the woman, who testified under a pseudonym, told jurors last week. If we ended up looking at another man, we would get a chastising for it, she said, referencing the spankings and physical abuse she said Mr. Kelly would dole out when his rules were broken.